Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, November 29th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us. So glad to have you here, and so glad to be here at our new Delta 9 studios in beautiful, legal Southeast Portland, Oregon. We've got all sorts of great stuff coming up for you on the show today, but before we get to it, I want to remind you that starting Thursday, it's Portland Weed Week. Actually, starting tomorrow, it's Portland Weed Week. They get it started tomorrow with a cannabis crawl, 3 different locations all across Portland, where you can check out all of the dispensaries in one particular area of the city. And then Thursday and Friday, there are seminars going on at the Left Bank Annex. I will be the MC of those seminars. Therefore, you will not have a live show here on Cannabis Radio on Thursday and Friday. And it continues on through Saturday. They've got the Taste of Terps Festival. And then on Sunday, absolutely free to the general public, age 21 and older, the Northwest Cannabis Classic, where you'll get to sample some of the Northwest's, or at least Oregon's, finest cannabis. So check that out. You can get more information at pdxweedweek.com. Now, coming up on the show today, we've got an interview coming to you for all you cannabis growers out there. Mahala and Natasha, I just recently met, and they're coming on the show to tell us about the use of Kangen water for cannabis cultivation. If you don't know, Kangen water is ionized water that has been quite controversial. We'll dig into the controversy and see what they have to say about using Kangen water for cannabis. Today, at the end of the first hour, we'll have time for a radical rant where I am rebutting one Idaho columnist's reefer madness. Apparently, this columnist in the Twin Falls area got wind of one of my posts on weednews.co and is calling me out over it. So he wanted my absolute undivided attention, did he? All right, we'll give it to him coming up at the end of the hour. Also on the show today, in Drug War Data Mining, we'll expand on the concept we talked about yesterday, and that is how many people in the United States still live under absolute marijuana prohibition. The number will surprise you. That's coming up in the data mines. Also on the show today, we get a cannabis focus where a former attorney general for the state of Washington who supported I-502 legalization says that it's possible that the feds will raid pot shops underneath the Trump administration. So, under the Trump administration, I should say. I don't think there's any shops underneath Trump at this point. Maybe under Chris Christie. There's a lot of room there. Anyway, we'll get to that in our Behind the Headlines, which comes right after the Cannabis Radio News. In the marijuana headlines today, we've got another suspension in the NFL over medical marijuana. We have got the governor of Montana and legislators there calling for an exorbitant tax on medical marijuana. We've got a look at Massachusetts, where there may be a delay in implementing legalization that was passed by the people. In the state of Maine, they are recounting the marijuana ballot there. We'll tell you how long that's going to take. In Maryland, they're trying to get more diversity in their medical marijuana industry. We'll tell you what's happening there. And there's going to be a delay in opening one of Anchorage, Alaska's first legal pot shops, thanks to some burglars who made Thanksgiving not so happy. That's all coming up in Hour 1, and then in Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, we take your calls live at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565. I'm Radical Russ Belville, live and direct from beautiful legal Portland, Oregon. We're back right after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Earn your PhD in THC monetization with CannabisRadio.com. Don't be late.
CannabisRadio.com proudly presents the newest and greatest podcast in the galaxy, The Real Dirt with Chip Baker, your insider industry connection to accurate and entertaining information about cannabis technology, production, cultivation, and everything in between. Rolling joints and dropping knowledge about cannabis technology, production, cultivation, and everything in between. The future of legal cannabis has arrived, and we want to give you The Real Dirt with Chip Baker. Look for new episodes at CannabisRadio.com, TheRealDirt.com, or subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
It's time to Hemp Present
with Enadina Stanger.
I say to you with all the fervor of my soul that God intended men to be free. Rebellion against tyranny is a righteous cause. And I believe that with every ounce of my soul, we are fighting a righteous cause because people need nature.
Marijuana,
Hemp Present, only on Cannabis Radio.
sweet sativa, queen.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, November 29th, 2016. The NFL suspended Buffalo Bills offensive tackle Chantrell Henderson for 10 games for using marijuana to relieve the effects of Crohn's disease. It's Henderson's second suspension this year after he served a 4-game ban to start the season. Henderson cannot appeal the suspension because the NFL doesn't allow an exemption for medical marijuana use. Henderson will sit out the final 5 games of the season, and the suspension will carry on either into the playoffs or next season. Henderson was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease a year ago and had 2 operations on his intestines last offseason. In New York, the state's medical marijuana program specifically lists patients diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease as being potentially eligible to obtain medical marijuana. Overall, Henderson's suspensions will have cost him over $473,000 of his $2.27 million contract. Montana's governor and a state legislator are proposing new taxes on medical marijuana in the state that just approved retail dispensaries in the November 8th election. Governor Steve Bullock's latest budget calls for a 6% medical marijuana tax that his office projects would reap $2.6 million in tax revenue over the next 2 years. State Representative Bradley Hammett is proposing a bill that would add 3% tax to fund medical marijuana for the indigent and another 21% tax for drug rehab programs. The combined 30% in taxes would be the highest tax rate on medical marijuana in the nation, exceeded only by Washington's 37% tax on recreational marijuana. Even though 54% of Massachusetts voters approved Question 4, legalizing marijuana in the state as of December 15th, prohibition may still be in effect after that date. William F. Galvin, the Secretary of State for Massachusetts, told the Boston Globe on Monday that certification of Question 4's results must be done by the Governor's Council, which only meets on Wednesdays. December 14th is the Wednesday when they will be certifying first the results of the presidential election for the electors to meet the U.S. Constitution's deadline of December 19th. If there isn't time in that meeting to certify Question 4, the current marijuana prohibition would continue until at least the December 21st meeting. The Maine Department of the Secretary of State says recounts in a pair of ballot questions will likely take 4 to 6 weeks. The department is getting ready to announce a schedule for the recounts. The The recounts have been requested for ballot questions that legalized recreational marijuana and approved a tax on high earners to fund public education. Voters narrowly passed both measures on November 8th. The department says it will make an announcement as soon as Monday about when the recounts will begin. The recounts are likely to start as soon as this week. The two recounts will likely take place at the same time. The Maryland Medical Marijuana Commission is taking steps toward evaluating minority participation in the state's nascent cannabis industry, the panel's executive director said Monday after critics complained of a lack of minority-owned businesses among finalists to grow and process marijuana. Patrick Jameson said the commission highly encourages applicants for these licenses to, quote, engage and recruit minority owners, investors, and employees where practical, end quote. The commission also met in closed session to discuss litigation over the licensing, said Dr. Paul Davies, the commission's chairman. Two would-be growers are suing the panel after initially scoring in the top 15, only to be replaced by other companies to address geographic diversity. Another applicant is suing over the lack of diversity evident thus far. Meanwhile, the commission gave preliminary approval for 102 dispensaries. They were chosen in a blind review designed to avoid favoritism, and their names will be made public on December 9th. A break-in at an Anchorage marijuana store has delayed the store's opening by a few weeks. KTVA-TV reports that the owners of Enlighten, Alaska say they will not be able to open as expected on December 17th due to the burglary on Thanksgiving. The owners say when they went to the store on Friday, they found someone had taken about $5,000 worth of items from the store, including electronics, tools, and the store's Wi-Fi router. Co-owner Evan Leventon says the Anchorage Police Department is investigating the break-in. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, November 29th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Forwarding the cause of legalization and research of the growing cannabis industry, one podcast at a time. The Cannabis Radio Network.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor-intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we want to continue our look at the incoming administration of Donald Trump and what effect that might have on our emerging legal cannabis markets and, of course, also our medical marijuana that we have throughout this country. And the latest article to take a look at this comes to us by way of, I think it's the Seattle, KIRO, Channel 7 up there in Seattle, entitled Former AG Says It's Possible Feds Will Raid Pot Shops When Trump Takes Power. The discussion is with former Washington State Attorney General Rob McKenna, and he told Seattle's Morning News that, quote, Senator Jeff Sessions has been the single biggest opponent to marijuana legalization in the U.S. Senate, according to drug policy staff under Clinton and President Bush. It is possible he will take a hardline law and order approach and assert federal preemption over those state laws, end quote. It's possible, he continues, that state medical marijuana laws and recreational marijuana laws are contrary to the federal criminal laws, end quote. Now, the concern here isn't whether or not they could bust the state legal marijuana laws, especially the commercial aspects of them. The question is whether or not they're going to. Now, in this discussion, some people will point to Donald Trump's frequent mentions on the campaign trail that he believes that marijuana is a state's issue, that he's 100% behind medical marijuana, and the state should be free to figure out what they want to do about recreational marijuana. But as many times as he said that, he has also said that he is going to be the law and order president. And judging by the way Richard Nixon used that term, we all know what law and order means. It means cracking down on the left, cracking down on minorities, and cracking down on marijuana. So the question still exists. Will they use these powers that they certainly have to be able to bust marijuana users? McKenna notes, though, that it's a tough battle to fight. He says, quote, you can only do so much, so is this going to be the Department of Justice's highest priority? Because it will bog them down in court for quite a while. The other consideration is the fact that more than half of the states have legalized medical marijuana and a growing number are legalizing recreational pot. So is this the fight they really want to have? He's got to decide what his priorities are and whether the fight is worth it, end quote. Well, whether or not the fight is worth it, that could depend on a lot of factors. Politics could make a huge difference here. If there's suddenly a need for Donald Trump to have a distraction from an embarrassing domestic scandal, perhaps the raiding and thwarting of state legal marijuana could be the distraction he would be looking for. The other consideration is just how much of a hands-on, top-down administrator does anyone expect Donald Trump to be? It was widely noted when he was trying to recruit for a vice presidential candidate that when he was recruiting John Huntsman, or was it, no, it was Kasich in Ohio, trying to recruit them for the VP spot, that his son said they would be in charge, the vice president would be in charge of domestic and foreign affairs, aka everything, and that Donald Trump himself would just be making America great. It's my belief that Donald Trump is going to be very hands-off. He's not going to concern himself with the minutia of policy details, and he's going to leave things to his vice president, Mike Pence. And if Mike Pence is the one giving the top-down orders to Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General and in the Department of Justice, then we could expect a whole lot of nastiness for the marijuana industry, because we know Jeff Sessions hates it. He says good people don't smoke marijuana. He says that there need to be adults in the federal government who say that it's not okay to legalize marijuana. So how much effort will they want to put into this? Keep in mind that President Obama, when he came into office, said that they wouldn't be spending a lot of their political capital and their scarce Justice Department resources on raiding medical marijuana. And yet, there were more raids on medical marijuana during the Obama administration than during any previous administration. It has a lot to do with what the U.S. attorneys want to do. And keep in mind that Trump will be appointing many of these U.S. attorneys. And if they're not getting strict top-down guidance not to do something, they're likely to want to do it. Now, so far, the Cole memo has kept the hands off of medical and recreational marijuana, but that's just a memo, and that can be rescinded by the Attorney General on day one. So whether we can decide whether Trump's administration is going to go gangbusters after the legal marijuana industry, we need to see what happens to the fate of the Cole memo first.
Boot to the head.
Some people deserve a boot to the head, don't you think? That sound means that it's 20 after, therefore it is 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. Happy $420 friends of the Rockies, including Anita Thompson, the widow of Hunter S. Thompson, who's planning a Gonzo Museum and Gonzo brand marijuana. I can't wait to try it, Anita. We're back in just a couple minutes. Stay around.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in cannabisradio.com.
While the feds and state are doing their dance, you still need to transact business and manage your cash. Go professional and let your customers pay with PayQuick. They pay you and they earn rewards points. PayQuick connects to your bank account for free and secures all of your transactions. And with PayQuick, you can pay your producers and processors for free. Plus, it pays to have it because it makes depositing your cash safe and so easy. No cops, no crooks, just compliance and comfort, knowing you have your cannabis business in check with PayQuick. PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
I said palm trees. Yo, it's your boy TJ, Trinidad James. You're listening to Dr. Bina on Cannabis Confidential. LA, what up?
Nickname James, man. I'm worried like a lake.
People were so excited to see you supporting our industry, and it's so important to see people who are mainstream, who are out there, that people look up to.
That was my first one ever going to, so that was definitely a big deal for me. It's not just, oh man, just come smoke a bunch of joints. It's a lot of science into it. It's way more interesting than a lot of people might think who look down, per se, on what we enjoy.
Cannabis Confidential, only on cannabisradio.com.
Get the latest updates on the Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking the Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Thanks to the legalization of marijuana in 4 more states this past election, we now have 2 of the 6 U.S. time zones designated as legal weed zones. Okay, so one is Alaska. With legalization there, we already had the entire Alaska time zone covered. Now we add California and Nevada to Washington and Oregon, and that gives us the entire Pacific time zone, except for that small chunk of the northern Idaho panhandle. Sorry, Coeur d'Alene. So within the 4 contiguous legal states of Washington, Oregon, California, and Nevada, we have a zone of America where 1 out of 6 American adults over the age of 18 are currently living. We now have the entire 1,380 miles of Interstate 5 running from the Canadian border at Blaine, Washington, to the Mexican border at San Ysidro, California, where no drug-sniffing dog can be used to detect the presence of marijuana in your car. And should Canada finally get around to legalizing, as promised, we could extend our road trip all the way up through British Columbia and the Yukon Territory and add another 2,558 miles on our way to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, the farthest north we can drive in the legal United States. God, imagine that. Almost 5,000 miles of driving where marijuana is legal. Maybe we should rename it Interstate 420. And then consider the other legal states of Colorado, Massachusetts, and Maine. Add all the 8 legal states in D.C. together, and we've got a situation where over 2 out of 10 U.S. adults live in a state where marijuana is legal. And then if you consider the addition of Florida, Arkansas, and North Dakota as medical marijuana states, another 4 out of 10 U.S. adults live where their doctor's recommendation for medical cannabis protects them from prosecution. Now, since the legal states are also medical marijuana states, that makes 6 out of 10 who can get medical marijuana in the U.S. Now, let's get into some of the heavy math. If you consider the 20 medical marijuana states that aren't also legal marijuana states, 9 of those are decrim states. That's where you get no arrest for personal possession. So that means if you look at the 6 out of 10 who live in medical marijuana states, it breaks down to about 2 of them who are in legal states, 2 of them who are in decrim states, and 2 of them who live where it's medical only. So it's about a third each one. About a third of the people who live in free America live in legal states. About a third live in decrim states. About a third live in medical only states. Now let's take a look at the cannabidiol states, those 16 mostly southern states that allow the use of low THC cannabidiol oil, mostly for the kids with epilepsy. If you count those, that makes up another 3 out of 10 U.S. adults. So that leaves us with less than 1 in 10 U.S. adults living in a state where there is no medical use of marijuana whatsoever. In fact, it's even less than that, because if you consider it's a little more than. The legal states, it's 21.29%. The medical states where it's not legal as well is 41.11%. And the CBD only states are 31.33%. So the non-legal, non-medical states, of which there are only 7, that breaks down to 6.28%. That's closer to 1 out of 20 than 1 out of 10. Now, of those remaining 7 states, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Nebraska, South Dakota, West Virginia, of those remaining 7, there are a few that offer some relief for marijuana crimes. There are 21 states where the personal possession of marijuana is decriminalized. That's where you get no arrest, and in most of them, you get no criminal record. Now, 8 of the decrim states are legal states, so decrim's kind of moot there. Doesn't matter. 7 of the medical marijuana states, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont, are decrim where they have a fine-only infraction for personal amounts. And 2 of the states, Minnesota and Ohio, have fine-only minor misdemeanors. So you don't get arrested, but you still get a criminal record. So if we take a look then at the CBD-only states, Mississippi is a decrim state with infraction only, while Missouri and North Carolina offer minor misdemeanor decrim. Nebraska is the only decrim state that has no medical use of marijuana at all. So of the 7, at least Nebraska has decriminalization. You're just going to get a fine and a ticket if you're caught there. That takes out another 0.58% of the people. Then consider industrial hemp. There are 32 states that have recognized the legality of industrial hemp. Of those, 23 of them only recognize it on paper. But the 4 states of Hawaii, Indiana, Minnesota, and North Dakota already have small research crops in the ground. And another 5, Colorado, Kentucky, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont, have licensed hemp farmers that are currently growing for commercial purposes. So, of the 7 non-medical, non-CBD states, Indiana has a hemp research crop. Nebraska and West Virginia have hemp statutes on paper. Therefore, only Idaho, Kansas, Louisiana, and South Dakota have absolute prohibition with arrests and criminal records for any person caught with any form of any cannabis used for any purpose. Those 4 states make up 3.07% of the population. Only 7.6 million adults in America live where marijuana is absolutely prohibited in all forms. You can catch that as my latest Radical Rant column on hightimes.com. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're talking Kangen water with Mahala and Natasha. Stick around.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
It's time for cannabis facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Russ Belville Show. We're as much like Cheech and Chong as ordinary Americans are like the Three Stooges. Hey, Mo!
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com. They say marijuana grows like a weed, but growing high-quality marijuana takes more than just throwing a seed in the ground. Join us as we speak with the most recognized cannabis horticulturists in the world and take your live grow questions in our Cultivators Corner. All right, welcome back, everybody. Today for the Cultivators Corner, we are joined by Mahala and Natasha, who are here to tell us about the use of Kangen water for cultivation of cannabis plants. Mahala, do I have you on the phone? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you have Mahala and Natasha right here. Hey, Russ.
Thank you for joining us, ladies. Really appreciate it. And is there a company name that I forgot to mention there? I didn't know if you guys had a particular brand we were supposed to say.
We do. The official name of the company is Enagic, but our brand that we rep is Kangen Queens.
Kangen Queens. Okay, folks. So that's Kangen, and it has to do with the use of what's called Kangen water to help cultivate cannabis plants. And I don't know which one of you would like to describe it, but could you tell our listeners what exactly Kangen water is?
I would love to start. This is Mahala. And so Kangen water is ionized water. It's we have these amazing, beautiful machines that are medical grade devices from Japan. Our company's 43 years old. And what happens is you hook up any regular tap or even a hose up to the machine. It filters out all of the chlorine and some other things that it filters. It doubles through a double carbon filter, and then it ionizes it, which basically means it's electrifying the water. It's kind of like electrocuting the water. So it adds tons of electrons back into the water, and that then turns the water into the most powerful and efficient antioxidant on the planet. So it's really good for your health. Do you want to add anything there, Natasha?
Wow. Well, the Kangen machine does a lot of things. It has many settings of alkalinity, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about as far as cannabis, alkalinity and acidity. I think we should just roll with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's about 9 different levels of pH water that you can get out of this machine.
Right. And in doing some research on this, I found a lot of controversy over the use of Kangen water. What I found were people discussing the use of it for humans, though, drinking the water, and a lot of skepticism here. What sort of scientific trials do we have on this to back up some of these claims?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've studied a lot about is the active hydrogen. And that's actually the most studied thing about the water. Well, that and the 2.5 hypochlorous acid, which I'll talk about in a second. But as far as human consumption, when the water is struck with electricity, what happens is it creates this energy that allows the molecules to separate. They get excited and they separate, just like when you heat up water to boil tea, for example, except it doesn't evaporate in this machine, obviously. And so then what that does is it releases active hydrogen. It adds extra electrons, and that's how you get the antioxidants. So there's tons of, peer-reviewed studies and lots of scientific research done on that particular aspect of the water. Again, the company being 43 years old, it's been well studied by over 6,500 scientists and doctors all over the world.
So, but I guess what I'm asking, though, is most of the studies that we're looking at on this had to do with human consumption. Is there anything having to do with the horticultural aspect of this?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for asking me that again. So the 2.5 hypochlorous acid water, which is the lowest pH that we get from our machines, that's the other most highly studied part of the water. And hypochlorous acid is actually FDA approved. And what it does is it kills 99.99% of all bacteria, germs, viruses, HIV, E. coli, strep. I mean, I could go on and on, MRSA. And in particular for the horticulture is it kills powdery mildew, mold, and mites, specifically russet mites, which we know, in the growers industry is one of the growers' worst nightmare.
So we're talking about using this as a miticide or a pesticide, sprayed on the exterior of the plant rather than watering the plant with it?
Yes, exactly. You want to?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, you can spray it, but one of the ways that a lot of the commercial growers are doing around here is they're starting to use foggers for the 2.5, and that seems to be a more efficient way. You don't have to pay someone to do it, and it really covers the plants really nicely. There's no worry about residue. It's super inexpensive, so it's a really good way to go for the russet mites.
Well, here's something, of concern to me. I mean, we know that the pH balance, the pH of the water is important in cultivating cannabis plants, but there's lots of cheap ways to change pH. We've got carbon activated filters that are fairly cheap if we want to filter out any sort of, contaminants in the water. So why am I going to spend $4,000 on a Kangen water machine? Is it going to increase the results of my yield that much?
Yeah, great example. Great question, excuse me. Yes, actually, Kangen water, the Kangen water machine is really an all-in-one solution because, number one, it replaces all your pesticides. You won't have to use anything harmful to the plants, anything chemical-based. It's highly effective, and it doubles as it's not only going to save you a ton of money, it's going to help you make more money because there's a different setting which you would use more around the 6.0 pH where you would mix that with your compost tea nutrient. You make compost tea, mixing it with your nutrients, and feed your plants with this compost tea, and their plants are going to grow bigger, more nutrient dense, and you actually don't have to use as many nutrients. So it's not only going to save you more money, it's going to make you more money in the long run. So it's really, and of course for your human consumption as well, the health benefits are huge. So it's really a win-win-win all the way around.
Well, let's give our listeners a chance to learn more about this. Do you have a website they can get some information and maybe some contact information if they'd like to discuss this further?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to kangenqueens.com is our website. And on that, you're going to find mostly health benefits for human consumption. What we prefer is we have a lot of information that we can send via email if a grower is interested on the agricultural side of things. And we prefer you call us at 908-NO-MITES. So again, that's 908-NO-MITES.
All right. Well, this is a interesting subject. I gotta be honest with you. What I found online made me very skeptical about this. So I'd love to see some more research, maybe some more testimonials on this before I want to, give it any sort of thumbs up. But I'm always keeping an open mind. I'd like to talk to people that are involved in the industry. And before we go, any last words you'd like to tell our audience?
Well, thank you, Radical Russ. I do want to say that. Thank you for having us on, and we're looking forward to being back with some answers to your questions.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mahala.
I was just going to say, I'll send you some stuff that I have that you're probably not going to find on the internet too much unless you really dig, and I'll send you some stuff that'll tell you, that'll give you some other perspective.
All right. Always more data is what I'm looking for. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us to talk about this. And maybe we'll have you back on for a follow-up sometime.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. Blessings, Russ.
All right. KangenQueens.com, KANGEN Queens.com if you want more information. Stay tuned, folks. We got some more coming up for you. A radical rant coming up on one Idaho columnist's reefer madness. He's calling me out. And, you know me, I have to retort. Be right back after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
From dabs to chibas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
Cannabis legalization efforts are increasing competition for businesses wanting to make it big. In this complex and fast-changing environment, only the savviest will survive. What are you going to do to stay ahead of the game? Enter New Frontier's free platform, Equio, the premier business intelligence, visualization, and marketing platform for the cannabis industry. With Equio, you can stay on top of your store's sales, trends, and competition, better understand your seasonality and broader sales trends, identify and compare your top products and categories, and cross-buying opportunities. Go to www.equio.io to sign up for your free membership today. That's EQUIO.io to sign up now. The power of real-time big data is now in your hands. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
Welcome to Cannabis Confidential. I'm your host, Dr. Dina. We've got David Faustino on the line, Bud Bundy from Married with Children. Did you feel nervous being a celebrity walking into a weed store?
I don't remember at all being like, ooh, I'm scared someone's going to take my picture here.
What are they going to say? Bud Bundy smokes bud? I mean, come on.
It wouldn't be a big shocker. Hey, this is David Faustino, and I'm on Cannabis Confidential with my girl, Dr. Dina, on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
A big shout out for today's rant goes to my fan Trickster Phillips out there in St. Charles, Missouri, who turned me on to an op-ed in the Twin Falls, Idaho Times News newspaper website at magicvalley.com. The op-ed is entitled, "Potheads, Stay Out of Idaho." The author, columnist Bill Colley, is also the host of Top Story on News Radio 1310 AM, so he's a radio guy like me. The column is no more chock full of reefer madness and stoner stereotypes than most, but Mr. Colley seems to be calling me out directly over my writing out at Weed News, so I thought he deserved a thorough reply. He begins by saying, quote, "Somehow in the last couple of weeks, there appear to be some people who believe opposition of the majority has subsided in Idaho when it comes to the use of marijuana. I first noticed change in a story I found from something known as Weed News. The fellow writing at Weed News explains he's from Oregon, and he smokes freely there, but can't when he visits Idaho. He has a couple of choices. Stay smoke-free or don't visit. Number one would be simple if the drug, as argued, isn't addictive. And number two would benefit the good people of our state." End quote. Well, Mr. Colley, I am that Weed News writer you're referring to. I was born in Nampa in 1968. I graduated Nampa High School in 1985. I attended Boise State University from 85 through 89, and I served in the Idaho National Guard from 85 through 90. I was forced to move out of Idaho in 2003 because I had married an Idaho woman who suffers from severe migraine pain. After trying every pharmaceutical remedy she was either allergic to or impervious to, she found cannabis was the only medicine that offered her any relief. Now, while I had been smoking pot in Idaho since 1990 without getting caught, I feared she would not be as lucky and get us both in trouble. Thus, we left our entire extended families and moved out to Portland, where she could treat her condition and I could enjoy my drug of choice without being arrested and jailed. Like perhaps your wife might treat her pain with Vicodin, and you might enjoy a cold beer without fear of law enforcement intervention. During the intervening 13 years, our nieces and nephews grew up and became adults. We missed almost all of their development. We couldn't be the aunt and uncle we wanted to be because my ex-wife's medicine is a crime in Idaho. The few times we'd drive back into the state for a birthday or a graduation were pretty harrowing, as we worried whether or not she'd get another migraine while we were in Idaho. Your title presumes there aren't cannabis consumers living in Idaho already. There are more than you can imagine. They're all around you, propping up a black market economy and denying Idaho millions in tax revenue. But they do provide a consistent trickle of prisoners for your minimum security private prison. That prison that's exclusively for substance abusers, and that prison that helps your governor and your state representatives get political contributions from the private prison industry. Look, your attempt at a gotcha by noting that if weed isn't addictive, I should just stop smoking it when I come to Idaho, completely misses the point. Idaho is one of 4 states, the others are Wyoming, New Jersey, and South Dakota, with statutes that criminalize merely having marijuana in your system. If I smoked legal marijuana in Ontario, Oregon, and then walked across the state line over to Fruitland, Idaho, I could be arrested and jailed for crossing a bridge with bloodshot eyes. Possession of any amount of marijuana earns me a misdemeanor with a possible 1 year in prison and a $1,000 fine. Now, look, I'm not bringing any marijuana into Idaho. I have plenty of friends all over the state who have some and are more than willing to share. But every trip we'd make was fraught with the worry that we'd get pulled over by the Idaho State Police because of our Oregon plates, and then discover we'd not been as thorough in cleaning our car and baggage of contraband as we had thought. Those drug dogs can alert on as little as a fleck of marijuana, or the cop directing the dog to alert so he can search without a warrant. And even having a fleck of marijuana in Idaho can get me arrested. I don't have to smoke it or even possess it to get in trouble in Idaho. In fact, many Idahoans who don't smoke or possess pot get in trouble for it. Once on my radio show, I had a contest to determine who did the most time for the least weed. My winner was a student from Idaho State University who never smoked pot in her life. She was in the dorm room of a friend who also didn't smoke pot when a campus cop investigating a noise complaint noticed a never-used bong on a bookshelf. That's paraphernalia in Idaho, whether it's used or not. And that got the dorm resident a misdemeanor charge, even though it was her roommate's bong. And when less than an 1/8 ounce of the roommate's marijuana was found in the subsequent search of the room, the young lady visiting was charged with presence at a location where marijuana is cultivated or stored and served 15 days in jail. But it's clear from the rest of your article that you're not basing your opinions on cannabis on any sense of compassion, justice, or science, but rather your holier-than-thou anecdotal judgments and your tired, debunked stereotypes. Mr. Colley, you're living proof of the axiom that marijuana is the drug so powerful it addles the minds of those who don't use it more than those who do. Your jibe about telling me not to visit the state and that would be a benefit to Idaho if I didn't visit, well, I don't know. That's up for the listeners to decide. Has Idaho benefited from my ex-wife and me not paying taxes in that state for 13 years? Has Idaho benefited from us spending our disposable income in Oregon businesses? Has Idaho benefited from us building our own businesses that created jobs here in Portland? Here's another quote from Mr. Colley's op-ed. Quote, "The noise they make about their proclivity reminds me of a couple of potheads in my old high school. Our history teacher was a retired Army colonel and tough as a man comes. He opened the floor to debate one day about legalization. And remember, this was 40 years ago. The usually listless dope smokers got so animated, he broke into laughter. 'You guys get higher talking about it than I do off a six-pack,' he said. The guys who smoked a lot of weed in high school often ended up dropping out, taking up lives of petty crime. Judging by the comments I read when I see stories about drug legalization, I don't believe marijuana is harmless. The vitriol is of a nature beyond all reason. You get, don't knock it until you try it, as if somehow it's going to make you happier, prettier, and wealthier. The nastiness is of a variety I'd expect to see from a heroin addict 3 days into withdrawal." End quote. Well, your stories about how animated we become over the legalization debate only illustrates how passionate an oppressed minority can be when it comes to discussing their liberalization. I'll bet your 1966 female classmates might have gotten just as animated on a discussion over abortion rights. And when people like you throw stones at us from your alcohol-filled glass houses, it makes us even angrier. Speaking of booze, the most dangerous recreational drug, your tale of adults pushing their 13-year-old to smoke marijuana was as enlightening as it would be if you substituted alcohol as the substance. I mean, clearly, parents who force their kids to take drugs are abusive. Unless, of course, it's pharmaceutical speed. But anyway, those are parents committing child abuse, and there's probably far worse problems going on in that family. How does a couple of sick adults abusing a child make all adult marijuana use harmful? If this is how your logic works, we'd better not discuss Catholicism. And then you tossed off some comment implying there are a few cannabis consumers, quote, who work in press shirts, ties, and wingtips, end quote. Yes, Mr. Colley, that would be me. I worked in information technology in Idaho for years, from government to banking to hospitals to eventually teaching computer software. And the entire time, I was a regular cannabis consumer. Now, these aren't jobs that any old dim bulb can compete in, yet there I was, a daily pot smoker, exceeding all my assigned goals, beating all my deadlines, and earning rave reviews from management. For 15 years, I managed databases and network security, only to lose that career when a test of my armpit hair outed me as a pot smoker. And then you make a couple of analogies that wouldn't get you a passing grade in a high school composition class. In one of them, you compare marijuana smoking to the legal bungee jumping still allowed on that bridge over the Snake River Canyon. Gee, why in the world does Idaho allow people to get a chemical high, adrenaline, doing something that injures and kills people? And your other analogy involves the lottery, which you admit to taking part in, then used to condemn, quote, crossing a moral line, end quote. Well, gosh, would we all be better off pushing the lottery back into the arms of gangsters running the numbers? Your comments also about Marinol are laughable. This is the synthetic version of THC, the cannabinoid that gets you high, that contains none of the CBD, the cannabinoid that reduces psychoactivity in THC, and Marinol is legal in all 50 states because it makes a profit for a pharmaceutical company. Not only does it not work as effectively for medical marijuana patients, I mean, imagine telling a puking chemo patient to swallow a pill, but you also confuse it with the non-psychoactive CBD oil your governor vetoed that's been found to reduce or eliminate seizures in epileptics. And then, for good measure, you go on with the long debunked gateway drug theory because you have cop friends who tell you it's true. Never mind that the Institute of Medicine in 1999 discovered that, quote, there is no conclusive evidence that the drug effects of marijuana are causally linked to the subsequent abuse of other illicit drugs, end quote. Never mind, there is an entire organization of cops called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition who recognize that the war on drugs is an utter failure. Since Barney Fife told you all potheads move on to heroin, and one of your high school pothead acquaintances was busted cooking meth, why, the gateway theory must be true. Here's where I'll throw you a bone, Mr. Colley. There is a gateway involved in the use of marijuana, and that's the gateway to the illegal drug market. When I was living in Idaho, I had to buy my weed from the guy, and he also liked to sell mushrooms, LSD, and meth. He never checked my ID, and he'd sell me as much weed as I wanted. There was no guarantee his weed was what he said it was, or that it wasn't adulterated with something else. The profit the guy made from his dealing wasn't taxed at all and was so lucrative he didn't need any other work. He was living in Idaho tax-free and working at most 2 hours a day. But when I go buy my weed in Portland, they check my ID at the door every time, despite my gray temples. All they have for sale there are marijuana products, not a speck of any other drug in sight. Everything is tested and properly labeled, and millions of dollars in taxes flow to the state. In Colorado, research shows that 18,000 jobs have been created and over $2.4 billion in economic activity has been created. Idaho stands as one of the only 7 remaining states where there's no legal marijuana, no medical marijuana, and not even non-psychoactive cannabidiol oil to help epileptic children. And Mr. Colley, maybe you're content with Idaho prosecuting a local mother in Gooding who's trying to save her epileptic daughter's life, all because your state drug czar, who's too chicken to debate me face to face, convinced your governor to veto the CBD bill your state legislature passed because you're all terrified that relenting 1 inch from absolute prohibition will lead to people smoking pot in your state, and they already are. Mr. Colley, your stance on marijuana is nothing but bigotry against the people who use it, plain and simple. You judge us like you would judge all drinkers if they were alcoholics, and we're not going to stand for it. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Take a seat and plant it, grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!